So I'm glad the FDA is kind of like stepping up a little bit more in a way of looking at certain things, especially on the food side of things, because they heavily scrutinize the dietary supplements very heavily, which in my opinion is not necessarily a bad thing because we're monitored heavily, which means that you can't really get away with things. Although some companies do and they get caught, which in my opinion is what should happen.
Who are you? What do you do? And where do you do it? And then we'll just let the conversation go. I don't have a time limit. So you've got more to do than me. I'm here till midnight tonight. I'm here for 12 more hours actually on the dot. And that's what we're doing.
Gotcha. So my name is Chaz Jones. I work for Jocko Fuel. I've been with them now for about 2.5 years. I manage the sales department for the specialty channel, retail, and international.
Okay.
So we got multiple different facets.
You're all over.
And then from like the perspective of where do I do it, it'll literally all across the U.S. as well as across the world.
Cool. So what's your background outside of Jocko? Like whether it be in training, like how you got into, like I said the sub industry,
yeah.
But I'm sure you have a better technical name for it. Like how did you find your way into this?
It honestly has been my whole life. So I like from a child, I was always into athletics, and I played soccer the whole way up into college. And then when I got out of collegiate sports, I got more into powerlifting, which is the complete opposite, obviously, from soccer.
And you're tall.
Yes, I was a goalie.
But powerlifting and height typically doesn't go hand in hand.
Correct. And I did not train well, so I had some injuries that kind of took me out of the sport fairly quickly. But still loved the lift and everything. But when it comes to the supplement aspect, so what actually got me into the supplements was my brother. So my brother was one hell of an athlete, and soccer-wise, and then he got into bodybuilding, and he was in a really bad car accident when he was right around 21 years old. And when we got to the hospital, the doctor even said he's got a 30% chance. Like, it was not good.
Yeah.
And he did live, thank God. My brother's still alive today. But the doctor even said, the way your brother is built is more than likely what saved his life.
Nice.
I mean, he had a lacerated liver, he had a broken back, broken neck, like all this stuff. And from that moment is when I dedicated my life to the natural industry to help people just build as, the best physique they want to, but from a perspective of understanding how supplements can be beneficial towards it. We obviously know nutrition is a basis, that more important than anything.
Yeah.
But when it comes to where you lack certain things, and that's where my knowledge started to build. 18 years old, I got involved in GNC. I was there for 7 years, went to supplement brand for 7 years, and then got into R&D and formulation.
Cool. So you've seen the whole gamut. That's one of my favorite things about, I've worked in a commercial gym since 18, personal trainer since 19, and you see this, you see the finished product, but the formulation, the R&D behind it is chemistry.
There's a lot behind it.
It's a lot. And people, you see the funny names or the classic names. We were talking about some of the ones that you see on the shelves, but the science behind it is real deep. Right. And we were having a conversation this morning, just in passing, talking about hydrate and just like electrolyte blends and different things. And you started talking, and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, save it for the pod, save it for the pod, save it for the pod. Because I feel like supplements have always been around.
Yep.
But it's evolved from creatine to steroids, because that's what it was. It's probably, it's less of that now. Creatine is definitely having a moment the last couple of years. And like, a protein powder, that's pretty much it. Like those were the two, multivitamins, things like that. But it has evolved beyond that scope now, where there is probably a supplement for damn near everything.
I would 100% agree. Yeah.
And from an athletic standpoint, I feel like hydration, the pendulum of hydration has finally swung back to where we really need to look at intra-workout hydration, not necessarily like pre-workouts and people like pre-workouts and branched in amino acids, but now it's like, no. Like, let's talk about like hydration and formulation of hydration for the athlete who's training, whether it be for speed, going through a longer workout session. A big phrase that I hear now is like on the performance endurance side with the rise of High Rocks and Spartan training, like all these different companies that have people moving longer, and even workouts. Like we were talking, like training with our dear friend Chad Coy, like that's a 90-minute workout. And if you're going to make it, I gave up after 70 minutes the other morning because I was just done. Like I was like, I don't have anything. I'm done. Yeah, I'm just done. So what are the conversations like for you? I know you work and oversee the sales team, but like what are some of the conversations you find yourself having more times than not in 2025, like in this industry, this market now?
So what I love most is like, just like you said, yes, I'm in sales, but my whole job is to educate.
Yeah.
You know, because there are a lot of different options on the market. There's a lot of good options on the market, right? And the first question I typically get whenever it comes to our stuff is, how are you different? And I mean, from a standpoint of like, say for instance, if you're looking at our hydration RTD or our powder, so we have a both in a drink and a powder, where we really try to set ourselves apart is that most of the stuff you see in the market is either salt heavy or potassium heavy. But in reality, if you have too much of one and none of the others, you get an imbalance. What our R&D guy, Brian, did is he pretty much broke down a sweat molecule to make it bioidentical. So really breaking it down to your 4 key electrolytes of chloride, sodium, potassium, magnesium in specific ratios to give you back exactly what you're losing. So it's not like, oh, we're just going to give you a gram of sodium and then lack all of the others. We're making sure everything's built in properly. And then on top of it, we want to give the cleanest options as well. So you have all these artificial sweeteners on the market or tons of sugar. We also know there's a lot of consumers that don't want all of that. So like for us, we don't use any dyes. We don't use any artificial sweeteners, any preservatives as well.
That was the first thing I noticed. I picked up, it was the fruit punch. It was a red one. Black label, I picked it up and I looked at the bottom. I know, oh, it's clear.
Yep.
Because I didn't expect that. Because, you see Gatorades on the shelf, you see Powerades, and it's like the color matches the flavor profile. You're like, that's just stuff.
And it's a psychological thing that the market just did, right? Because you think of it like you drink fruit punch, and psychologically now I feel like we're trained to think of it being red.
Yeah.
When our team just went out to one of the largest expo called Natural Products Expo West out on the West Coast. And they're very strict on who they let go to attend and be vendors at the show, because just like it says, Natural Products Expo West, they want the cleanest products possible. So, we got a chance to get out there and showcase, and we have three dispensers, and everybody thought we were doing water. So they would do the shots and they're like, oh, there's flavor to it, So like, as you say, there's no colors in this hydration, which is not typical.
Yes. And we were talking earlier, like one thing, it's funny, like Jocko's here. Like, I'm not paid to say this, but like I drink a lot of supplements and stuff like that. Like it's been the biggest game changer to my sleeping 7 hours consistently. I train at 5 a.m. So sleeping 7 hours beforehand and improving sleep quality, but then also hydration before training. And with my clients, like I offer drinks for them and they're like, wow, this workout seems more doable. And it's because they're hydrated.
Yeah.
Like it's a cheat code. In 2025, I think the biggest cheat code to a quality training session is being hydrated for the training session.
So simple.
You talked about breaking down like the molecule, right? Can we just talk a little bit more about hydration? Because I think for our audience, we have a lot of performance coaches. I say like sports performance adjacent. So your rehab chiros, PTs that are looking at that. But we get a lot of, believe it or not, we get a lot of parents and recreational coaches, things like that, who love Parisi material. Can we just talk a little bit more about hydration? You talked about the 4 key differences and how you guys broke down like a sweat molecule to do that. Like, I'm sure you have more. I want to just give you the floor to just keep going about it, because it really does make a difference. And we are, as a society, so chronically dehydrated that the second you ask your body to do anything with intensity, like you're on a very slippery slope.
Well, you got to think too, most of the stuff that I even say, because of energy drinks now, the number one most addicting thing in this world is caffeine.
Yeah.
And nearly everybody consumes caffeine.
Yep.
And caffeine robs your body of your, hydration component, but it's taking out those vital nutrients that your body needs to balance everything out. And where I know there's a lot of consumers that are just like, I'll just drink water. But the fact matters, you need the electrolytes to replenish everything properly. So if you don't have the electrolytes with water, it's not doing its full potential of what it can do. And I mean, you're talking about everything from neurological decline. Like, you could get foggy mind and a heartbeat being depleted. You get headaches from muscle cramps. And what's funny, like muscle cramps is something so simple that we do replenish. Like you grab some salt, get a salt tab in you, help get rid of that. But again, it's making sure you have all key ones. And one of the most lacked minerals in our diet is magnesium. Magnesium is great for everybody, and specifically it's our workhorse mineral for inherent emotions too. So like being able to say that like within the formula, and even on top of it, like we make a magnesium capsule too, which is, it's a 3 different versions of magnesium for 3 different really reasons as far as like muscular, neurological, and heart. But like I say, when you're talking about how we're looking at the products we are building, we're saying what is already on the market and what does it lack and where does it need that improvement. And that's what I love most about Jocko with our R&D team is they take their time to formulate these things. There's a real reason behind it. And we'll never put something on the market that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier. Like, would you guys make something like this? You're like, nah. You were like, sure. You're like, yeah, it doesn't fit. What is the, so this is, let me turn here because this is where I find it super interesting. So like you talk to the people, right? And then you have like the R&D team. What are those conversations like just in the business world where you're like, you guys, I just envision you're like in a war room and you're like, people are asking about this and your R&D team's like, maybe, you know, and you're like, but we need this. Like, is that, what is it like the conversations with the company when it's like bringing a product to market or like, even I'm sure like formulating something from an RTD to a powder, like you were explaining the differences between the two. And I was like watching you guys like taste the stuff this morning and you're like, oh, this is this form. I'm like, how do you like, it was wild. It was like watching a wine tasting. It looked like it had like wine tasting vibes. But what are the conversations back in business stuff like, okay, this product, bringing it to market, like, what does that process look like? Because I think a lot of people we say, we see this, we see the products, we see it on the shelf, everything's pretty, but the process to get there, like,
I'll be the lengthy process.
Yeah. Talk a little bit more about that. I just find this super fascinating. This is for me now. This people in this map.
It's such a lengthy process because number one, you kind of figure out where there are gaps in the marketplace, right? And then the other thing too is we learn from our consumer. Yeah. You know, like Jocko Fuel has a very strong, loyal customer base. We're very fortunate for, and you know, they'll be the ones that tell us too, like, hey, we noticed that, you know, this is the type of product that we're taking that Jocko Fuel doesn't have. You know, it would be something you consider. And like once we start to finally think like, oh, and then bring it to Jocko's table and say, hey, you know, have you thought about this? What's your idea? And again, like you said, like the conversation we had earlier about plant protein.
Yeah.
Probably not going to happen for us because it's not on our brand so much. Yeah. But and that's not to say that plant protein is not right because you have individuals who need something like that. But I mean, from your idea of just thinking, okay, there could be a concept here to commercialization. I mean, in most cases, it's at least a year.
Yeah. At
least a year. Because you got to go from the whole formulation standpoint to stability. If it's a powder, how many samples are you going to try before you find out the right taste profile too?
Do you get to do the tastings?
Yeah.
Is it awesome?
Sometimes.
What flavors? Give me the word. Give me the graveyard of flavors that didn't make it.
Well, let me put it this way. The reason why I say it's fun sometimes is because where I was at before Jocko was specifically in raw ingredients. And if you've ever tasted caffeine by itself, it is extremely bitter. Extremely. Like, have you ever bit into an orange rind and how bitter that is? Yeah. Times it by 20.
Oh,
so nasty.
That's unenjoyable.
So, like, think about how good things taste.
Yeah.
And then realizing how much work goes into blocking those flavors. It's not easy. You know, and then on top of it, typically, like any of the stimulants, like dynamine, which is something that we use in our pre-workout, dynamine is a stimulant that actually, number one, is not vasoconstricting, which is great. It's dopaminergic, which actually means it does not make you addicted to. It actually amplifies what caffeine can do and limits your adaptation to caffeine. And it prolongs the half-life of caffeine. So like you and I were speaking about pre-workouts and like, oh, you see 500, 600, 700 milligrams.
Yes, the stim happy.
Like you'll see something coming from us a little bit later this year. I won't go too in depth.
I've heard rumblings. It's got a
little bit more than 200 milligrams of caffeine, but again, it's not something that's going to be overbearing. But we build around certain things. So instead of giving you like 500 milligrams of caffeine, we're going to give you the other ingredients that complement caffeine, make it work better, and doesn't make you all tweaky. You know, and again, this is all research and development. You got to find these things. And you got to find things that, like us, were clinically validated. So we ought to make sure that the ingredients we're using has the research behind it.
Can you talk a little bit more about, because that is, from a perspective, Parisi, we have a lot of youth athletes. We have a lot of parents that come to us. You know, I was used to creatine is creatine a steroid? My kid wants to take away protein. Is that bad? We're like, no, it's really important. Like when you look for these things, like you find that it's clinically validated, like that the ingredient is what it is and that it's actually in the bottle. Like, can you talk about what that process is for Jocko and just so that it's almost like the due diligence of like, yeah, you can't just put stuff out. And back in the day, you probably could, but now it's super important to have these validations from a third party or whatever it might be.
Yeah, it's a validation from a clinical standpoint, but also the ingredients have to be GRAS, which is generally registered as safe.
Okay.
So it's got to go through this. I think it's a 90-day protocol that you're doing under, like closed doors and monitoring blood work and everything and how the body reacts to it. And once you get the key measures to prove, oh, this ingredient is safe, like there's a lot of things out there that, like, thankfully now from the FDA on, like, even outside of dietary supplements, because dietary supplements are looked at and scrutinized very heavily. Yeah. And it's because in reality, when you're thinking of, just as I mentioned, that your nutrition is basic, it's so much key, because if you lack certain nutrients, it is the stem into all different type of health ailments. Yeah. Again, like I mentioned about magnesium, if you're deficient in magnesium, like you're talking blood pressure, you're heart arrhythmias, muscle cramping like crazy. There's so many bad things that can happen. So I'm glad the FDA is kind of like stepping up a little bit more in the way of looking at certain things, especially on the food side of things, because they heavily scrutinize the dietary supplements very heavily, which in my opinion is not necessarily a bad thing, because we're monitored heavily, which means that you can't really get away with things, although some companies do and they get caught, which in my opinion is what should happen.
Yeah. That's interesting, because, I think probably this is like 15 years ago, right? People were like, well, this was when the pendulum of supplementation that swung back. It's like, well, it's not regulated by the FDA. Why would you put that into your body? But just at that point, even like you said, like the supplement industry is not quote unquote regulated, but it's monitored and it's scrutinized, which could be even tougher than, and I also think too, the populations will determine what stays. I think there's a reason why, like you said, you first started with GNC, like there's a reason why products circulate through shelves, but there's also a reason why products have stood the test of time.
And creatine.
Yeah. And because they work, they're popular, they're valid, and creatine, like we said, is having, I think, the biggest moment of any supplement.
As it
I've seen, right? From depression to dementia treatment to brain health, high dosage versus low dosage, like it is, I love the money that's going into the studies. I love that the studies are readily available. And that obviously in today's social media world, people are breaking it down and talking about what's important about it. I think that's phenomenal. When you guys, if you could pull back the curtain a little bit in the conversations you guys have, like outside of like brand importance, is there just stuff like you guys are like, how we're not going to cross that bridge? Like you said, like obviously like with the vegan protein, it's not really on brand what we're looking to do. But is there something that like people have brought to the table and you guys are like, it's either too complicated, you can't, like, it's just not worth it? Like, is there like the graveyard of things that just didn't make it, or things that are like, it's in circulation, we don't know, maybe, but we don't know? Like, I always think that stuff is, what does make it is obviously the best of the best, but the stuff that just came up short, I always am like, oh, man, really?
And depending on how you look at it, a lot of that is determined by Brian and Jocko.
Okay.
And why I say that is because the whole reason Jocko started this company was because he was, feeding his kids some supplements of a protein shake that ended up coming out later that it had toxins in it, it had metals in it, it got tested for. So that's why his whole part of being involved with the company was to create the cleanest things as possible. So whenever you're saying like things that may have been on the docket or asked to create that just got shot down, it's ultimately just because from a health perspective, we don't agree with it.
Gotcha. I didn't know that about Jocko, that it was like a parent solving a kid problem.
Well, and trust me, you're going to see a kids line from us come.
I've also heard rumblings of that. I think that's phenomenal as someone who has been giving his kids, protein powders, and we bake with protein in our house.
Yeah.
I have two daughters. Like they even like creatine. I think it's incredibly safe. Like pediatricians now are on board with this. Like they think it's phenomenal. Obviously it's a case by case basis. What I do with my kids, you don't need to do with your kids, but have the conversation with your pediatrician and registered dietitians and things like that. So it's super important. But getting back to like just sports and athletics, like you guys obviously work with athletes, right? Like we have one of your athletes here at our Parisi. We're people will know about the backdrop. We're still in Phoenix, Arizona. We're still filming Parisi National Summit. We have one of your athletes here. What is it like? What does the athlete to business relationship look like? I don't know if you are involved with that. Like, what does it look like for you? And just kind of what Like, just talk about like what the relationship is like.
It's pretty cool because we in sales get a chance to come across a lot of people who, fit the Jocko Fuel athlete, So it's both. Like most of the time, the athletes, like we have somebody obviously who manages a lot of them, but some of them might come through other relationships and introductions that we have from friends. Like for instance, like we just recently signed Derek Lunsford from bodybuilding. I've been friends with Derek for a decade, and he's worked for some other companies, and just when the opportunity brought itself to the table, it's like, hey, let's have the conversation. So it's all over the place. And a lot of athletes, believe it or not, own their own businesses. So that's like a dual relationship. So I'll help manage the business side of things. They help manage the athlete side of things.
That's cool. And do they product test?
Oh yeah, they'll most of them will be part of it, because even sometimes depending on which avenue we want to go and demographic we want to target, that's where we might even bring him into conversation for R&D.
Yeah, I don't know. I just find the whole side of it fascinating. More so on how does it get there? The conversations along the way. Do you have any like wild stories that you've seen, just like that you can share? I don't know if you can. I don't know if
well, wild stories as far as like most of the stuff that I see even before Jocko Fuel, if like things don't come to fruition, it's just because like maybe it's too hard to flavor. Because like I say, with some of the ingredients are just so horrible tasting.
Yeah.
That it's like no matter how hard you work at masking it, it just doesn't.
Yeah, and so I'll say this. So this is just completely off topic, and I don't know if you guys knew you were doing this. The blue raspberry, I took a sip, and it was the most nostalgic drink that I've had in a minute. It tastes just like the blue flavor ice popsicles. The popsicles you go to the grocery store, they're like melted, they're warm. You buy them in like a red mesh bag. You put them in your freezer, and then you cut the top off with scissors, and then you just slurp it. And it was the blue flavor ice popsicle.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God. And to the point where, like I said, a verbal, oh my God. And we were carrying the product out, and the guy was with Jones and goes, you dropped it on your foot, like what happened? And I was like, this is flavor ice. Like I knew it as soon as it hit. And just the nostalgia behind it. I was like, gosh, these guys are so good at what they do, because it's just, sometimes you have flavors, like you're saying, they're not good.
Right.
They're not good. But the last thing I do want to talk to you about, because you explained the difference to me this morning between like the Hydrate RTD, ready to drink, for those that don't know what RTD is, and the stick.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important, because a lot of times we're making a decision as a consumer of, do I buy this and I drink this, or do I buy something like a stick and put it in later? And a lot of times, like, I would have think it's identical, and you said it's not, and you were explaining it, and it made perfect sense. I'm like, this is so genius.
There are very slight differences between the two, but some of it is mainly whatever you come down to. Like in our powder, we have D-ribose and we have L-theanine built into it. L-theanine is to kind of help like calm you a little bit, help the muscles relax a little bit more, like whenever you're done. But the D-ribose is more of like automatic ATP energy. So as soon as you consume it, it's a fast digesting carbohydrate your body's going to use. It limits itself sometimes whenever you go into RTD from a standpoint of cost and then stability as well. So normally we try to do things as close as we can whenever it comes to an RTD to a powder version, but there will be some little things, nuances to it. But what I say is like the stick packs is all about convenience.
Mm-hmm.
Being able, because like, again, I'm on the road half the time of the year, right? So I just throw my stick packs in my bag. We've got their creatine stick packs. We have protein in a packet. We've got hydration in a packet. Those are my staples. They always go with me.
Yeah. I would have flipped that. I would think that the RTD is the most convenient piece of it. But like you're saying, stable, like ready to drink, mixed in a hydration, like liquid already, versus like what we can put in a package that you're bringing with you. Like there is a slight difference there.
Yep.
I actually thought the stick tasted better. It was the orange. I thought the stick tasted better than the RTD, which I don't know. That's probably just personal.
And it's definitely personal because it's very mixed.
Yeah, but I've, as far as like RTDs go, I was like, these are delicious. You guys were the ones doing the wine taster. It's hard. We always get asked in the sports performance landscape, like, what should I get for my kids? And a lot of my people say, whatever your kid is going to think is going to taste good. That's typically number one. I've moved away from that because I'm like, listen, sometimes it should taste okay if it's in market, right? Like, it should have some decent flavor profile. But now it's more than ever. Like, you should look at it and say, okay, like, I'll use Gatorade as an example. They're not affiliated with us, so that's totally fine. I could talk about it. Like, they don't have any sodium in their drinks. Powerade, same thing. Powerade will put a little bit of potassium, a little bit of magnesium, but you can tell it is flavor first versus actually supplementating, like you're like actually providing value as an athlete what you need. But on the flip side of that is you're saying heavy sodium, like you shouldn't feel like you're drinking or eating a salt.
Right.
It's important. Lick your lips when you're sweating. It's salty. You're replenishing what you're losing. But we grew up, Gatorade's on the sidelines and things like that. And man, it has come full circle where now where it's like, that's just more marketing and just probably just been around and it's Gatorade. But that's not even, if you go to Gatorade.com or something, like that's not even what they sell. Like that's not what that's not what is on the sideline of the Super Bowl or anything like that. Like it's crazy. And it makes you wonder, like from an athlete's standpoint, this is what we tell parents and why I bring it up is like, no parents, like, yeah, some of it, like you really need to look at it now and you need to understand this. And that's kind of our role is like, I always say like frontline prevention, frontline the industry of like, okay, I recommend like this is what your kid should have when they go to an AAU basketball tournament and they're playing 7 games in 3 days. Mm-hmm. And your kid's going to lose 8 pounds in 3 days, mostly through hydration. You need to weigh, you need to do this. And like, you need to think about getting in, 8 ounces of an electrolyte drink every 15 minutes for 3 hours. Your kid's playing basketball. Like it comes down to being that specific now. And I do feel, as you can attest to, like you do this, like companies know this. Like, and the companies that put it out there, it's really important. And that should be like the first red flag for parents is like, if you don't hear it from the companies, like that's a red flag. If the companies are educating first, solving problems, we talk about this, I was talking about like growth, like they're solving problems, but Parisi, we're coaching, we're solving problems. It's the same kind of deal. Like products are solving problems, are very niche now more than ever. It's not just a general protein. It's not just a general hydration drinks.
It's the value that it brings, right?
Yeah.
Because like one thing that I learned, especially whenever I was trying to figure out like my training and diet specifically, like the one statement I remember somebody saying is you eat to live, you don't live to eat, right? So your purpose of anything you put in your mouth should have a reason behind it. And I think about that from where you had mentioned like taste is king. Taste is extremely important because if especially with kids.
Yeah.
If they're not going to drink it, then what, they don't like the flavor, they're not going to drink it. With ours and how the market has really gotten, because like I mentioned before, everything we do is 100% naturally flavored and sweetened. We don't use any artificial sweeteners. We don't use any preservatives or anything like that. And normally when I would say like a decade ago, if I would be saying a product is 100% natural like that, the connotation already is like, it's probably not going to taste.
It's not going to taste good at all.
Right. And just like you got the chance to try these like protein drinks and our hydration drinks. Hydration drinks literally taste like candy. They're so good. And the fact that they don't have any sugar built into it, they don't have any sucralose or asulfame K or aspartame. Like our 3 sweeteners that we use are allulose, Reb M from fermented sugarcane, and then we also use one for stevia, and we also use monk fruit. So again, everything from a natural perspective. And if people don't know what allulose is naturally found in like figs in nature.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's a natural, ultimately, it's almost like a natural sugar that has no impact on your insulin response whatsoever, or blood sugar.
Yeah. And that's, kind of a whole different podcast talking about artificial sweeteners. As I think those artificial sweeteners get vilified in today's world, which is wild because people will be like, oh, artificial sweeteners, but then slam a bottle of wine. You're like, well, yeah, right. Well, a whole another conversation about that. Don't even go down that route. But yeah, it's just wild to me, like the way the science has progressed, and it's how it should be, right? And like it just matters more now, I think, more than ever. And for athletes, like our job in sports performance, and even in Gen Pop training, right? Like it's important just to make sure that I talked about this with Stan Schofield, one of our Parisi affiliates, like nutrition is 90% of all human endeavors, training, lifestyle, whatever it is, 90%, if not more. You can make the case it's like 97, 99%, right? It's that important. But we, like as an industry, need to educate parents, and we're often looked at like the first sign of kind of like, what should I do?
Right.
Creatine is steroid. It's the age-old debate.
Well, and that, I was glad that you actually brought the creatine up earlier, because just like you said, instead of even talking about how creatine is beneficial for the muscles, first thing that you started to say was about brain.
Yeah.
Because that's all these new studies coming out to show in Alzheimer's dementia support and everything else. So you're talking the audience for creatine is so broad.
It's everyone.
Exactly. And even from a kid's perspective, like if anybody ever has kind of like a little bit of remorse to like think about getting creatine, the one major thing is you just got to make sure you stay hydrated. 5 grams a day of creatine, just making sure whoever's drinking it is staying hydrated, you're going to get benefits out of it.
And by staying hydrated, I think sometimes people are like, well, I need to then drink. It's like, just if you're drinking water, if you're drinking 2 liters of water a day, you're doing better than most.
Right.
I've never had an issue with creatine and like hydration. I put it in my coffee. I put it in like any drink that I smoothies, whatever. Like I've never had any weird side effects. I've never had any issues with that. I tell people, I'm like, this is just read about it from a depression standpoint, from a cognitive function standpoint. I mean, high dose, 30 grams a day is studied in clinical studies around dementia and Alzheimer's, and it is wild.
Yeah.
And it makes it, we're talking about 5 grams. Like, you're getting it when you eat steak. And I've worked with, really when this came through, I had a handful of, one year it was very odd. I had like a half a dozen vegan, vegetarian athletes start training. So I went vegetarian for a year just to try, like, not because, just to be like, I can do, like, how does this work, right? How do I get protein? How do I prioritize it? And biggest thing I found was supplementation is huge if you are on an alternative diet, or I'll say like a plant-based diet or things like that, because you aren't getting natural creatine sources. It can go a long way in just how hydration is huge. If you have a high fiber diet, like that is something that you should just be really focused on for your own GI health at that point. But it's one of those where it's all encompassing, and I think it's more in the forefront than ever now. But I'm super thankful that you took the time today, because just the conversation this morning, I was like, dude, this is not a sales guy. This is the guy who knows what he's talking about. You're talking about like science and molecules. I'm like, this guy is more than a sales guy. So super thankful you took the time to come on today.
I appreciate it, Casey.
Appreciate you, man.
Thanks.
Thank you.